Vincenzo Moretti slammed the SUV door shut before the engine had even stopped rumbling. His boots struck the stone driveway with heavy, deliberate steps as his piercing eyes swept across the massive estate. Something was wrong. The mansion was too quiet, far too quiet. Every night, the front entrance was guarded by at least 4 armed men. Every hallway stayed lit, every camera blinked with its tiny red light. Tonight, darkness, silence. Not a single guard stood at the gate. Vincenzo's tattoo-covered hands slowly curled into fists. The intricate black ink that covered his neck disappeared beneath the collar of his tailored black suit, while the tattoos running down both arms vanished beneath his sleeves. Every scar on his body carried a story. Every tattoo marked a victory or a loss. Men across Italy whispered his name with fear. He wasn't just another crime boss. He was the man who had built the Moretti empire from the ashes of a dying organization. Yet tonight, standing in front of his own home, he felt like a stranger. Without saying a word, he slipped a pistol from beneath his jacket. Click. The safety came off. He moved silently toward the front door. It wasn't locked. That alone made his heartbeat quicken. Vincenzo never allowed unlocked doors. Never. He eased the door open. The familiar scent of polished wood greeted him, but something else lingered beneath it. Perfume. Expensive perfume. Not his wife's. His eyes narrowed. "Who has been here?" he whispered to himself. He stepped inside. The marble floor echoed beneath his boots. Still, nothing. No footsteps, no voices. No servants rushing to greet him. Only silence. Then, a trembling voice broke through the darkness. "Signor Vincenzo." He spun instantly, aiming his pistol. An elderly woman stood near the kitchen entrance with both hands raised. Maria. She had worked for the Moretti family for nearly 40 years. She had fed him when he was a little boy. She had patched his scraped knees before he ever held a gun. She wasn't merely the maid. She was family. Her wrinkled face had turned ghostly pale. Tears filled her eyes. "My God," she whispered, "you're alive." Vincenzo lowered the weapon. "Maria?" She hurried toward him, looking over her shoulder every few seconds. "No, no, you shouldn't have come." His voice hardened. "What happened?" She grabbed his arm with surprising strength. "Please." Her voice shook. "Stay quiet." He frowned. "What are you talking about?" She leaned close enough for him to hear her whisper. "Your wife." She swallowed hard. "Hired them." For several long seconds, neither of them moved. Vincenzo stared at her as though he hadn't understood the language. "What did you just say?" Maria's lips trembled. "Your wife hired men to kill you." The words struck harder than any bullet ever had. His expression didn't change. But inside, everything stopped. He slowly removed Maria's hand from his arm. "You've known me since I was a child." "I have. You've never lied to me. Never. So tell me." His jaw tightened. "Why would Isabella do that?" Maria closed her eyes. "I prayed I was wrong, but I heard everything." Vincenzo shook his head once. "No." She looked directly into his eyes. "I wish I were lying." He turned away from her. His breathing remained calm. Years of surviving wars had taught him to control fear. But this wasn't fear. This was disbelief. His wife, his Isabella? Impossible. She loved him. Didn't she? Just 48 hours earlier, they had spoken on the phone. She had told him, "I miss you. Come home safely. I'll cook your favorite dinner." Her voice had sounded genuine. So how could she possibly? Maria interrupted his thoughts. "They thought you would return tomorrow morning. I know. They're waiting upstairs." "They?" "4 men." He slowly looked toward the staircase. The mansion suddenly felt unfamiliar. Every shadow looked dangerous. Every hallway felt like a trap. Maria's breathing became heavier. "I begged Madonna to protect you. I never imagined you'd walk through that door tonight." Vincenzo remained silent. His instincts screamed that Maria believed every word she was saying. But instincts could be wrong. He needed facts. When did they arrive? This afternoon. And Isabella welcomed them. Maria nodded. She opened the gates herself. His heartbeat quickened again. What did they look like? I've never seen them before. Were they Italians? 3. And the fourth? I think he was Russian. Professional killers. Not street criminals. Not local gang members. People hired for one purpose. Maria wiped away another tear. I wanted to call you. What stopped you? They took everyone's phones. Vincenzo looked around. My guards. She hesitated. They're gone. Gone? I don't know if they're dead or paid to leave. His face hardened. That answer told him everything. Someone had prepared this carefully. Months of planning. Maybe years. He slowly slipped the pistol back beneath his jacket. Maria looked horrified. What are you doing? I'm going upstairs. No, she grabbed his sleeve again. They'll kill you. If they wanted me dead. He looked toward the staircase. They've already failed. She shook her head desperately. You don't understand. They're expecting you tomorrow. Exactly. They don't know I'm here. For the first time since he'd entered the mansion, a faint smile appeared on Vincenzo's face. It wasn't the smile of a husband. It was the smile that had terrified rival families for decades. They've lost the advantage. Maria stared at him. You still trust her? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked toward a framed photograph hanging beside the staircase. It showed him and Isabella 10 years earlier. She wore a white wedding dress. He wore the only white suit he'd ever owned. She had been laughing. He remembered that laugh. Warm, honest, beautiful. She had changed since then, not overnight. Little by little, she smiled less. She spoke less. Sometimes she'd stare out the bedroom window for hours without saying a word. Whenever he asked what was wrong, she always answered, I'm fine. He believed her now. He wondered if she'd been lying for years. Maria followed his gaze. I know you love her. I do. But love can blind even the strongest man. Vincenzo finally looked back at her. What exactly did you hear? Maria took a deep breath. I was cleaning the upstairs hallway. I heard voices. I recognized Signora Isabella. And? One of the men asked. She closed her eyes, trying to remember every word. Are you certain he'll return tomorrow? What did Isabella say? Maria whispered. Yes, he always keeps his schedule. Vincenzo remained expressionless. Maria continued. Then another man asked, do you want us to make it look like an accident? Vincenzo felt his stomach tighten. And Isabella answered. Maria's voice cracked. No, I want him to know why he is dying. Silence filled the mansion. Even the old grandfather clock seemed to stop ticking. Vincenzo slowly lowered his head. Those words, those weren't misunderstood. They were clear, deliberate, painful. Maria reached for his hand. I'm so sorry. He gently pulled away. I need to hear it myself. They'll kill you before you can. They'll try. Before Maria could stop him again, a faint sound echoed from the second floor. Laughter. A man's laughter. Then another voice. Deep, cold, confident. Vincenzo immediately recognized one thing. Those men felt safe. They believed their target was hundreds of kilometers away. One of them suddenly said loudly, tomorrow morning, one shot is enough. More laughter followed. Maria covered her mouth. They're still here. Vincenzo slowly backed toward the hallway instead of the staircase. Maria frowned. Where are you going? He answered quietly. The old servant passage. Her eyes widened. You remember it? I used to hide there as a child. She nodded quickly. It still connects to the library upstairs. Good. He paused before disappearing into the narrow corridor, concealed behind an antique cabinet. Then he looked back at Maria one last time. If I'm right. His voice became almost a whisper. Everything I believe about my marriage is about to change. If you're already wondering whether Isabella is truly a traitor, or if something even darker is hiding behind these walls, make sure you subscribe, like the video, and tell us in the comments, would you trust your spouse after hearing what Vincenzo just heard, or would you walk away without looking back? Because what Vincenzo is about to discover upstairs will shake the Moretti family to its very core. Vincenzo slipped into the narrow servant passage and quietly pulled the hidden panel shut behind him. Darkness surrounded him. Only a faint strip of light seeped through the cracks in the ancient wooden walls. He remembered these passages well. When he was 8 years old, he had hidden inside them, after breaking one of his father's expensive vases. Maria had spent almost 3 hours searching for him before finding him asleep behind the library wall. Back then, these passages had been a playground. Tonight, they were his only chance of staying alive. He moved carefully, placing each step where he knew the old boards wouldn't creak. Every few seconds, he stopped to listen. Voices, they were getting closer. He reached the hidden opening behind the library bookshelf and slowly pushed it open just enough to see inside. The library lights were on. 4 men sat around a polished oak table. 2 cleaned their pistols. Another calmly sharpened a combat knife. The 4th leaned back in a leather chair, sipping expensive whiskey as though he owned the mansion. Vincenzo studied each face. None of them looked familiar. That bothered him. He knew almost every professional killer operating in Italy. These men weren't ordinary mercenaries. They carried themselves like former soldiers. Disciplined, patient, dangerous. Then, the library door opened. Every assassin stood immediately. Vincenzo's heart pounded once. Isabella walked in. She wore a long black dress that flowed gently as she crossed the room. Her dark hair rested over one shoulder, and despite the late hour, she looked perfectly composed. She was a strikingly beautiful Italian woman, proudly plus-size, with a soft, full figure that filled the room with quiet confidence. Her round cheeks, warm olive complexion and gentle features had once been the first thing Vincenzo thought about every morning. She had never apologized for her curves, and Vincenzo had always adored every part of her. To him, she had never needed to be anyone else. But tonight, her face carried no warmth, no smile, only determination. She placed a heavy leather briefcase on the table. Click, the locks opened. Bundles of euros filled the case. One assassin smiled. "You came prepared." "I always do," Isabella replied. The Russian-looking man asked quietly, "Half now? The rest after it's done." He nodded fair. One of the Italians looked toward the window. "So, your husband still believes he's in Sicily?" "Yes." "He won't return until tomorrow?" "He never changes his plans." Vincenzo's jaw tightened. He had changed his plans. Only 3 people had known: his pilot, his bodyguard, and Luca. The thought flashed across his mind before disappearing just as quickly. No, Luca had been beside him for 23 years. He was practically a brother. Vincenzo pushed the suspicion away. The Russian closed the briefcase. "What if he arrives early?" Isabella answered without hesitation. "He won't." The room relaxed. Another assassin laughed. "You seem very certain." "I know my husband." Those words hurt more than they should have, because she did know him. Or at least, she used to. One of the men poured her a glass of wine. She refused it. "I'll drink after tomorrow." The Russian raised an eyebrow. "Nervous?" "No. You don't look happy." She stared directly at him. "Happiness died 15 years ago." Silence settled over the room. The Russian leaned forward. "You loved your brother." "I still do. You've waited a long time. I had to be certain." "And now?" She inhaled slowly. "Now justice finally comes." Vincenzo frowned. "Justice? Justice for what?" One assassin scratched his beard. "I've killed many men. I don't usually ask questions." "But," he looked at Isabella, "did your husband really deserve this? For the first time, Pain appeared in her eyes. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached into her handbag. She removed an old photograph. She placed it on the table. My little brother. The killers looked at it. He was 24. He wanted to become a chef. He hated violence. He wasn't part of the family business. She swallowed hard. They found his body inside an abandoned warehouse. The police blamed another family. They were wrong. The room remained silent. She continued. I spent years believing the lie, until someone showed me the truth. The Russian folded his arms. What truth? She reached into her handbag again. This time she removed a folded piece of paper. Even from where he was hiding, Vincenzo recognized it instantly. It looked exactly like one of his official authorization orders. His heartbeat quickened. No, he whispered to himself. She unfolded the document. I found this. One assassin read it. His eyes widened slightly. It has your husband's signature. It does. So he ordered the execution? That's what this says. The room became heavy with suspense. Vincenzo stared at the paper. Impossible. He had never signed such an order. Never. His organization had rules. No innocent family members, no wives, no children, no siblings. Marco had never been a target. Never. His breathing became slower, controlled. Someone had forged it. But who? Before he could think further, Isabella spoke again. For 15 years, I slept beside the man who murdered my brother. Her voice cracked. I kissed him. I defended him. I loved him. A tear rolled down her cheek. I even blamed myself for doubting him. She quickly wiped it away. No more, one assassin quietly asked. Why not simply divorce him? She laughed bitterly. You don't divorce a mafia boss. You survive him. The Russian nodded. I understand. No, she shook her head. You don't. You've never watched the man you love become the man you hate. Those words echoed inside Vincenzo's mind. He felt as though the air had disappeared from the room. Could she really believe that? Had someone poisoned her mind so completely? Another assassin looked uncomfortable. I've worked many contracts. This one feels different. It is. Because you still love him. She looked away. I hate that I do. Silence. The confession hit Vincenzo like a hammer. She still loved him, yet she wanted him dead. Those two truths couldn't exist together, unless she genuinely believed he had betrayed her first. The Russian finally stood. We leave before sunrise. The cameras. I already disabled them, Isabella replied. The staff. They've been sent away. The guards. She hesitated for the briefest moment. I paid those willing to disappear, and the rest? They're locked inside the wine cellar. Vincenzo frowned. Alive. Thank God. She hadn't ordered unnecessary bloodshed. That wasn't the woman he married. The Russian noticed her expression. You've made this easier than most clients. I never wanted innocent people hurt. One assassin chuckled. In this business, there are always innocent people hurt. Her face hardened. Not if I can stop it. Again, that wasn't the language of someone consumed entirely by revenge. Something still didn't fit. The Russian closed the briefcase. Tomorrow, 9 o'clock, he walks through that front door. I shoot once. Watch, then we're gone. She nodded. No suffering, no torture, just one shot. I don't want him begging. The Russian smiled. Mercy? No. She looked down at Marco's photograph. I'm giving it to myself. She picked up the picture and quietly walked toward the door. Before leaving, she stopped. Without turning around, she said softly, I hope God forgives me. Then she left. The library door closed. The assassins relaxed again. One of them laughed. I almost feel sorry for the boss. Another shrugged. He probably deserves it. The Russian finished his whiskey. I don't care, as long as the money clears. Inside the hidden passage, Vincenzo slowly leaned against the wall. His breathing had become uneven, not because he feared death, because he had just watched the woman he loved cry while arranging his murder. He whispered into the darkness, "What happened to us, Isabella?" For the first time in years, the feared Mafia boss of the Moretti family felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel since childhood. His heart was breaking. Then, footsteps echoed behind him inside the hidden passage. Someone else was there. Vincenzo spun instantly, his pistol already in his hand, aiming into the darkness. A familiar voice whispered urgently, "Don't shoot. It's me." Maria stepped into the faint light, breathing hard. "I knew you'd come here," she whispered. "What are you doing here?" Vincenzo asked. "I couldn't let you face this alone." He lowered the gun. "You heard everything?" "No, but I heard enough." She searched his face. "You saw Signora Isabella?" "I did." He stared silently toward the library wall. "She believes I killed her brother." Maria closed her eyes. "So, the lie is still alive." Vincenzo looked at her sharply. "What do you mean?" Maria hesitated. Fear spread across her face. "I prayed I would never have to tell you this." His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Tell me what?" Maria glanced nervously over her shoulder, as though even the walls might be listening. Then she said the words that would change everything. "I know who made Isabella believe you murdered Marco." If you're enjoying the twist so far, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with someone who loves mafia dramas filled with betrayal and shocking revelations. And before the next part, leave a comment. Who do you think framed Vincenzo? One of his closest allies, or someone even more unexpected? Maria's words hung in the stale air like smoke that refused to disappear. Vincenzo stared at her. His expression remained calm, but his eyes had changed. They were no longer filled with confusion. They were searching. "You know who did it?" he asked quietly. Maria nodded once. "I've suspected him for years." "You suspected? I never had proof." "Then why didn't you tell me?" She looked down. "Because I was afraid." Vincenzo frowned. "Afraid of whom?" Maria slowly raised her eyes. "The only man who was always close enough to hear every conversation." She paused. "Luca Romano." Vincenzo immediately shook his head. "No." Maria didn't argue. She expected that answer. "I knew you wouldn't believe me. You've lost your mind." "I wish I had." "Luca saved my life." "I know." "He buried my father." "I know." "He stood beside me at my wedding." "I know." "He carried my son when he was born." Then stop saying his name. Maria's voice softened. "I watched him become part of this family." "So did I. But sometimes," she swallowed, "the man sitting beside you is the one holding the knife." Vincenzo looked away. He refused to believe it. Luca had been his consigliere for over 2 decades. When rival families declared war, Luca stood beside him. When Vincenzo had been shot 3 times outside Naples, Luca had donated blood. When the Moretti Empire nearly collapsed, Luca worked without sleep for 4 straight days. No, it couldn't be him. Maria stepped closer. "Do you remember the dinner 15 years ago? The night Marco disappeared?" "I remember." Luca arrived late. He was meeting suppliers, so he said. Vincenzo folded his arms. "Where are you going with this?" "I was cleaning your father's office." "So, I saw Luca come out. He wasn't supposed to be there." Vincenzo stayed silent. He looked nervous. "What did he say?" He smiled. "Maria, he told me." She mimicked his calm voice. "Some doors should never be opened. And I thought nothing of it." She looked down. "I'm an old woman." "Vincenzo," Maria continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Back then, I convinced myself I was imagining things. I told myself it wasn't my place to question your most trusted advisors." Vincenzo's grip tightened around the pistol. "You've had 15 years to tell me this." "I know, and you stayed silent." "I stayed alive." He looked at her sharply. "What does that mean?" Maria inhaled deeply before answering. 3 days after Marco died, someone broke into my room. His expression changed. They searched everything. My drawers, my mattress, my photographs, my Bible. What were they looking for? I didn't know then. And now, she met his eyes. I think they were looking for something I had accidentally seen. Vincenzo felt a chill crawl up his spine. You never told me. I wanted to. What stopped you? The next morning I found a dead black bird on my pillow. Silence. I understood the message. Vincenzo's jaw clenched. In our world, Maria nodded sadly. A dead bird means the next one is you. I knew, so I stayed quiet. Vincenzo closed his eyes for a moment. He hated fear, not because he had never felt it, because he knew exactly what it could make people do. He couldn't blame Maria. She had survived by remaining invisible. But now the silence had become too expensive. He opened his eyes. If Luca forged that order, he did more than that, Maria interrupted. What else? He built Isabella's hatred one lie at a time. Vincenzo frowned. What do you mean? Maria leaned closer. Think. When was the first time Isabella changed? He searched his memory. It wasn't sudden. No, it happened after Marco's funeral. Maria nodded. And who spent the most time comforting her? Vincenzo answered automatically. Luca. The answer had left his mouth before he realized what he had said. Maria didn't need to respond. His own words had done it. Luca visited almost every day, Vincenzo murmured. He said he wanted to support her, and he did, until she trusted him. Maria's eyes filled with sadness. Sometimes the easiest lie to believe is the one told by the person wiping away your tears. Vincenzo leaned against the cold stone wall. His mind raced. Pieces that had never fit together suddenly demanded attention. Luca always insisted on handling Marco's investigation. Maria nodded. He volunteered. He told me not to get involved. He said it was too emotional. Maria remained silent. He even said he'd find the people responsible. And did he? No, exactly. For the first time that night, real doubt entered Vincenzo's heart. Not doubt about Isabella, not doubt about Maria, doubt about the man he had called his brother. Before either of them could speak again, a muffled vibration echoed through the hidden passage. Vincenzo reached into his jacket. His secure satellite phone. Only 3 people knew its number. He glanced at the screen. Luca Romano, his heartbeat slowed. Maria looked terrified. Don't answer. He stared at the screen for several seconds. Then, he accepted the call. Luca. The familiar warm voice answered immediately. Boss, you finally picked up. You had me worried. Vincenzo forced himself to sound normal. I've been busy. I heard. The attack in Palermo. You okay? I'm alive. Good. A brief pause followed. Then Luca laughed softly. You always survive. I try, so. Luca continued casually. When are you coming home? Vincenzo's eyes locked with Maria's. He answered carefully. Tomorrow morning. Perfect. You'll be tired. I'll make sure everything is ready. Everything. Your favorite breakfast. Vincenzo nearly smiled. Luca had no idea. You've already spoken with Isabella? Of course. She misses you. Another lie. Or perhaps another manipulation. I miss her too, Vincenzo replied. I'm sure she'll be happy to see you. I'm sure. Luca lowered his voice. Boss, yes. There's something important we need to discuss. What is it? Not over the phone. It concerns the future of the family. I'll wait until tomorrow. Good. Another pause. Then Luca added, travel safely. I always do. The call ended. The screen went dark. Maria stared at him. He knows nothing. No. He thinks you're still away. Vincenzo slipped the phone back into his pocket. But he wanted to know exactly when I'd arrive. Maria slowly nodded. He was checking. Yes. He needed to be certain. Vincenzo looked toward the library again. If Luca planned this, he planned everything, Maria whispered. There's more. His attention returned to her. What? I kept something. You kept what? For 15 years. She reached into the pocket of her apron. From inside, she removed a tiny silver key. It was old, scratched, almost black with age. Vincenzo frowned. "What is that?" "Your father's desk." He looked confused. "My father's desk?" "The secret compartment." His eyes widened slightly. "I thought only my father knew about it." Maria smiled sadly. "I cleaned that office for 30 years. I knew every secret drawer. And the day after Marco died, I found something hidden inside." His breathing slowed. "What?" "I never understood it, so I hid it." "Where?" "In the chapel. For 15 years. You never looked at it." "I was too afraid." Vincenzo took the key from her hand. It felt cold, unexpectedly heavy. "My father's office is downstairs." Maria nodded. "If the compartment hasn't been discovered, whatever is inside is still there." Before they could move, the sound of footsteps echoed from the other side of the wall. The assassins, leaving the library. Vincenzo carefully peered through a narrow crack. The Russian checked his watch. "We leave now." One of the Italians frowned. "What about the woman?" "She'll stay. No loose ends?" The Russian smiled. "She's not the problem. Our problem arrives tomorrow." The men laughed quietly as they disappeared down the hallway. Only after the footsteps faded did Vincenzo breathe again. "They're leaving." Maria nodded. "Then now is our chance." They hurried through the servant passage, descending the narrow staircase that led toward the first floor. Neither spoke. Every second mattered. Within moments they reached another hidden panel. Vincenzo pushed it open. His father's office looked exactly as it had years ago. Dark oak furniture, shelves lined with old books. The massive antique desk still stood in the center of the room. Dust covered its surface. He walked toward it slowly. "I haven't been in here since my father died." Maria stood near the door, keeping watch. "The compartment is beneath the bottom drawer." Vincenzo knelt. His fingers searched beneath the wood. Then, click, a tiny keyhole appeared. He inserted the silver key. Turn. Another click. A narrow compartment slid open. Inside, there was only one object, a thick brown envelope. No name, no writing, just an old wax seal that had already been broken. Vincenzo carefully removed it. His pulse quickened. Inside the envelope were several photographs. He looked at the first one. His face froze. It showed Marco, alive, talking to someone inside a warehouse. He turned to the second photograph. This time, the other man's face was visible. Vincenzo's breathing stopped. "Luca," he whispered. Maria stepped closer. "What is it?" Without answering, he handed her the photograph. Her hands immediately began shaking. My God, the picture clearly showed Luca shaking Marco's hand only hours before Marco's death. But that wasn't what shocked Vincenzo the most. There was another photograph beneath it. He slowly pulled it out. This one showed Luca handing an envelope to a man Vincenzo instantly recognized. Enzo Bellini, the ruthless underboss of the Bellini crime family. The Moretti's deadliest enemies 15 years earlier. Vincenzo stared at the image in disbelief. Luca met with Bellini. He remembered something. The Bellinis had somehow known every Moretti move during that war. Every ambush, every shipment, every safe house. At the time, Vincenzo had believed they had a spy. Now, a horrifying possibility emerged. What if, he looked at Maria, the spy wasn't a soldier? Maria finished the thought. It was the consigliere. Vincenzo's entire body tensed. If that was true, then Luca hadn't just betrayed him once. He had betrayed the Moretti family for decades. Before either of them could process the discovery, a sudden metallic click echoed from the office doorway. Neither of them moved. A calm, familiar voice broke the silence. "I was wondering how long it would take you to find those photographs." Vincenzo slowly turned. Standing in the doorway, with a pistol pointed directly at his chest, was Luca Romano. Luca smiled almost affectionately. "I have to admit, boss," he tilted his head, "coming home a day early was the first intelligent mistake you've made in years." He stepped into the office and quietly closed the door behind him. The lock clicked into place. Luca kept the pistol steady, his smile never fading. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The room felt smaller. The silence felt heavier. Vincenzo slowly lowered the photographs to his side. "So," he said quietly, "it was you." Luca sighed. "I was hoping you'd never open that compartment." Maria stepped protectively beside Vincenzo. "You monster!" Luca looked at her and chuckled. "Maria, you've lived longer than I expected." She glared at him. "I prayed every day that God would expose you." Luca shrugged. It took him 15 years. Then he looked back at Vincenzo. "I suppose congratulations are in order." Vincenzo's voice remained calm. "You killed Marco, no." Luca smiled wider. "I arranged for Marco to die. You forged my signature. I did. You convinced Isabella I ordered it. Eventually, you betrayed my father." Luca laughed softly. "I betrayed everyone." Maria whispered, "How could you?" Luca looked almost amused. "Because loyalty doesn't make a man rich." Vincenzo took one slow step forward. The pistol immediately followed his chest. "I wouldn't." Luca's tone hardened. "I've never missed." Vincenzo stopped. "You called me your brother." "I did. Was any of it real?" Luca stared at him for several seconds. Then, surprisingly, yes. The answer caught Vincenzo off guard. Luca continued. "I respected you. I admired you. I even loved you like brother. So why?" Luca exhaled deeply. "Because your father chose the wrong son." Vincenzo frowned. "What? He chose you?" The room fell silent again. Luca's eyes darkened. "For 30 years I gave everything to this family. I was smarter. I was more patient. I built your father's finances. I negotiated peace with our enemies. I expanded the ports. I doubled the income. And when your father died," he laughed bitterly, "he handed everything to his son, my son, the spoiled boy everyone adored." Vincenzo shook his head. "You could have walked away." "I didn't want to walk away. I wanted what should have been mine." Maria stared in disbelief. "So you destroyed an entire family because of jealousy?" Luca looked at her. "No, I corrected an injustice." Vincenzo spoke quietly. "You murdered innocent people. I removed obstacles. You destroyed Isabella. I gave her purpose. You destroyed me." Luca smiled. "You were easier to break than I expected." For the first time, real anger crossed Vincenzo's face. "You watched my wife cry for 15 years. Yes, you comforted her. I did. You watched her hate me. I needed her hatred." Maria could barely contain herself. "You evil man," Luca interrupted. "Don't make me sound special. You'd be amazed how easily people believe a lie." He looked directly at Vincenzo, especially when that lie explains their pain. Vincenzo slowly clenched his fists. "You forged one document." Luca laughed. "One?" He shook his head. "No, Vincenzo, I forged dozens." "What?" "I forged shipping records. I forged police reports. I forged bank transfers. I even forged letters from your father," Maria gasped. "My God," Luca nodded proudly. "I've been writing this family's history for 20 years. Vincenzo's breathing became slower. Every word felt like another knife. "Lorenzo," he whispered. Luca smiled. "You remember, Lorenzo was my accountant. He disappeared." "He didn't disappear," Luca answered coldly. "I buried him." "What about Matteo, the driver who crashed?" "He never crashed." "What about Antonio, the bodyguard?" He asked too many questions. Vincenzo stared at him in horror. "Luca, how many?" Luca tilted his head. "I stopped counting." Maria covered her mouth. "You've been murdering your own people." "My people?" Luca laughed loudly. "They were never my people. They were yours." He stepped closer. "I simply borrowed them." Vincenzo looked toward the office window. The curtains moved gently. Outside, the first signs of dawn were beginning to appear. Luca noticed. "We're running out of time." "So am I," Vincenzo answered. Luca smiled. "You still think you're leaving this room?" "I know I am," Luca chuckled. I admire your confidence. Before anyone could react, a loud knock echoed through the office door. 3 knocks. Everyone froze. Luca frowned. Who is it? A familiar female voice answered from outside. Luca, Isabella, I need to speak with you. Luca quickly looked at Vincenzo. His eyes narrowed. He lowered his voice. Not a sound. Maria whispered, She doesn't know you're here. Luca walked backward toward the door without taking his gun off Vincenzo. What is it? He called. I can't sleep. You should rest. I need to ask you something. What? There was a pause. Then Isabella said something that made Luca's expression change completely. Why did Vincenzo never deny killing Marco? Inside the office, Vincenzo frowned. Luca remained perfectly still. Isabella continued from the hallway. I've been thinking, if he really ordered it, why didn't he ever admit it? Luca answered calmly. Because guilty men lie. Another pause. Then Isabella spoke again. I looked through Marco's old journals tonight. Luca's eyes narrowed. What journals? The ones he hid in the kitchen ceiling. Maria suddenly looked shocked. I forgot about those, Isabella continued. Marco wrote about meeting someone secretly. Luca's heartbeat quickened, though he hid it well. And he never wrote Vincenzo's name. Silence. He kept mentioning someone else. Luca forced a laugh. Grief plays tricks on memory. No, her voice sounded uncertain. It wasn't memory. It was handwriting. He wrote the same name 3 times. Vincenzo exchanged a quick glance with Maria. Luca asked carefully, What name? Another long pause followed. Then, Luca. The room instantly became suffocating. Luca's confident smile disappeared for the first time that night. What? He wrote. She unfolded something outside. If anything happens to me, Luca knows why. Maria's eyes filled with hope. Vincenzo felt his pulse race. Isabella continued. I don't understand. What did Marco mean? Luca answered immediately. He probably meant I was helping him. But why hide the journal? Another pause. I don't know. I found something else. Luca swallowed. What? A key. Vincenzo instinctively looked toward the open secret compartment, the same type of silver key. Maria whispered. There were 2 compartments. Luca heard her. His head snapped toward them. His expression turned icy. You knew. Maria immediately regretted speaking. Luca smiled again, but it wasn't the same smile. This one carried something darker. You've become a problem. He slowly raised the pistol higher. Both of you. Outside the office, Isabella knocked again. Luca, are you alone? He answered without hesitation. Yes. Open the door. I'm busy, I said. Her tone became firmer. Open the door. Luca's eyes never left Vincenzo. Quietly, he reached into his pocket with his free hand. He pulled out another pistol. He placed it on the desk. Then he looked at Vincenzo. You have 30 seconds. To do what? Decide. Decide what? Whether your wife dies first. Or you do. Maria gasped. Luca, he ignored her. I've spent 20 years building this empire. I'm not letting one diary destroy it. Outside, Isabella pounded harder. Luca, I know you're hiding something. The office door shook violently. Vincenzo spoke for the first time in nearly a minute. You've already lost. Luca laughed. No, I simply need more bodies. He slowly cocked the pistol. Click. I've cleaned up bigger messes than this. Vincenzo's tattooed hands slowly relaxed at his sides. His breathing became steady, almost peaceful. Luca frowned. What are you smiling about? Vincenzo looked him directly in the eyes. I'm smiling. He took one deliberate step forward. Because you just made your first mistake. Luca scoffed. And what mistake was that? Vincenzo's voice dropped to almost a whisper. You talked too much. Just then, a deafening crash exploded through the office as the heavy wooden door burst inward. Splinters flew across the room, and everyone instinctively turned toward the entrance. Standing in the shattered doorway was Isabella. She was breathing hard, her eyes red from crying. In her trembling hands, she was aiming a shotgun directly at Luca Romano. Isabella's hands trembled, but the shotgun never wavered. Her breathing echoed through the shattered office. Luca stared at her in disbelief. For the first time in over 20 years, he looked afraid. "Isabella," he said calmly, "put the gun down." She ignored him. Her eyes drifted past him. They landed on Vincenzo. The world seemed to stop. Neither of them spoke. For 15 years they had shared the same home, the same table, the same bed. Yet they had lived like strangers carrying the same grief. Tears rolled down Isabella's cheeks. "You're really here," Vincenzo nodded slowly. "I came home early." She swallowed hard. "So, you heard everything." "I heard enough." The shotgun remained pointed at Luca. Luca forced a nervous laugh. "This is exactly what he wants." Isabella didn't even look at him. "I found Marco's journal." Luca's smile faded. "I found every page." His eyes narrowed. "You should have burned it." "I almost did." She wiped another tear away, but then I read it. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small leather notebook. The edges were worn, the pages yellow with age. "This belonged to my brother." She held it tightly against her chest. "He wrote in it every night." Luca's voice hardened. "Journals don't prove anything." "No." She nodded. "But names do." "My brother wrote." Her voice cracked as she read. "Luca asked me not to tell Vincenzo about the meeting." Silence. She turned another page. "Luca said everything would make sense after tomorrow." Another page. "I don't trust him anymore." She looked directly at Luca. "My brother was afraid of you." Luca's face became expressionless. So, she continued, turning pages. "If anything happens to me, tell Vincenzo I never betrayed him." Vincenzo slowly closed his eyes, his chest tightened. Marco had known. Marco had tried to warn him, but the warning had died with him. Isabella's voice broke. "I hated the wrong man." She looked toward Vincenzo. "For 15 years, I hated the wrong man." Vincenzo said nothing. There were no words large enough to hold 15 years of pain. Luca suddenly laughed, a loud, confident, almost joyful laugh. Everyone looked at him. "So that's it," he said. "A diary changes everything." He shook his head. "You people never learn." He slowly lowered his own pistol. "Truth doesn't matter. Power does." Vincenzo answered quietly. "Not anymore." Luca smiled. "You still don't understand." He reached into his jacket. Instead of another weapon, he removed a small black remote. Maria's eyes widened instantly. "No." Luca looked at her. "Yes." He held the remote between two fingers. "Did you really think I planned only one escape?" Vincenzo frowned. "What is that?" Luca chuckled. "Insurance." He pressed a single button. Nothing happened. He frowned, pressed it again. Still nothing. Maria suddenly smiled. Luca noticed. "What?" She laughed softly through her tears. "I knew. You knew. When I saw strangers inside the mansion, I checked the basement. And I found your explosives." The smile vanished from Luca's face. "I removed every detonator." "Silence. You." Maria nodded proudly. "I may be old, but I still know this house better than anyone." Luca's, "You old woman," she interrupted. "No, you underestimated the maid." For a brief second, no one moved. Then Luca exploded into motion. He lunged toward Isabella. She reacted instantly. Boom! The shotgun roared. The blast shattered a bookshelf behind Luca as he dove sideways. Books crashed onto the floor. Vincenzo charged. He slammed into Luca with all his weight. Both men crashed across the antique desk. The pistol skidded across the wooden floor. Maria kicked it underneath a cabinet. Luca drove his elbow into Vincenzo's ribs. Vincenzo grunted but refused to let go. The two men rolled across the office. Punches landed. Blood splattered across the carpet. Luca struck first. Vincenzo answered harder. Neither man spoke. Years of loyalty, years of betrayal. Every unanswered question, every lie, every death, everything came down to two men fighting in the room where it had all begun. Luca grabbed a bronze letter opener from the desk. He swung wildly. Vincenzo caught his wrist. The blade stopped inches from his throat. Their faces were only inches apart. Luca smiled despite the struggle. "I made you," Vincenzo growled. "You nearly destroyed me. I gave you an empire. You poisoned it." Luca laughed. "I taught you everything. You forgot one lesson. And what's that?" Vincenzo twisted Luca's wrist until the blade fell. Family isn't something you steal. With one powerful punch, Luca collapsed against the desk. Before he could recover, Isabella stepped forward. She aimed the shotgun directly at him again. "Don't move." Luca looked from her, to Vincenzo, to Maria. Then he laughed. "You still can't do it." Isabella's voice trembled. "You murdered my brother." "I did." "You made me hate my husband." "I did." "You stole 15 years of my life." "I did." He leaned forward. "So pull the trigger." Her finger rested on the trigger, but she couldn't move. Tears blurred her vision. "I can't." Luca smiled. "I know. You still have a conscience." Vincenzo slowly stood beside her bedside. He gently placed one tattooed hand on the barrel of the shotgun. He lowered it toward the floor. Isabella looked at him in confusion. "Why?" His voice remained calm. "Because Marco deserved justice, not revenge." Luca scoffed. "You've become weak." Vincenzo shook his head. "No, I've become tired." Sirens echoed faintly in the distance. Luca's expression changed. "What?" Maria smiled. "I made one phone call. You said they took your phone." "They did." She nodded. "But they forgot about the emergency line hidden inside the chapel." Luca's eyes widened. "You called the police?" "I called everyone." The siren grew louder, closer. Luca looked toward the window. Blue lights flashed beyond the gates. He whispered, "No." Vincenzo looked at him. "It's over." Luca suddenly reached inside his jacket again. But before he could draw another weapon, Isabella struck his wrist with the shotgun stock. The pistol fell harmlessly onto the carpet. Within seconds, armed officers stormed into the office. "Nobody move." Luca slowly raised his hands. For the first time in decades, the mastermind manipulator had nowhere left to run. As officers handcuffed him, he looked at Vincenzo one last time. "You think you've won?" Vincenzo answered quietly. "No, I think the lies have finally lost." Luca was led away without another word. The office fell silent. Maria sat heavily in a chair, exhausted. "I never thought I'd live to see this day." Vincenzo walked toward Isabella. They stopped only a few feet apart. Neither knew how to begin. Finally, Isabella whispered, "I'm sorry." He didn't answer immediately. She continued, "I should have trusted you. I wanted to. But every piece of evidence." She broke down, crying. "I failed you." Vincenzo stepped closer. "So did I." She looked up. "What?" "I saw your pain. I watched you become someone else. I kept asking if you were all right. When you said yes, I accepted the answer because it was easier than asking again." She shook her head. "This wasn't your fault." "No," he sighed, "but it was my responsibility to protect this family. I couldn't even protect us from the man standing beside me every day." Isabella slowly reached for his hand. For a moment, he simply looked at it. Then, he took it. She cried even harder. "I don't expect you to forgive me." He looked into her eyes. "Forgiveness isn't given in one night." She nodded. "I know, but truth has to begin somewhere." Maria smiled through her tears. "Your mother would be proud of both of you." Several weeks later, the Moretti estate looked very different. The armed guards were gone. The hidden weapons had been surrendered. The authorities dismantled the criminal network, using the evidence Luca had hidden for years. Vincenzo spent days giving statements. He accepted responsibility for the crimes committed under his leadership, even those he had not personally ordered. He knew that rebuilding a life required facing the consequences of the old one. Many people were shocked. Some called him a fool. Others called him courageous. He ignored them all. One quiet afternoon, Vincenzo and Isabella stood together at Marco's grave. She placed fresh white lilies beside the headstone. "I finally know the truth," she whispered. "I'm so sorry it took me so long." Vincenzo rested a hand gently on her shoulder. "I wish he were here." "So do I." They stood in silence, not because there was nothing left to say, but because some wounds were too deep for words. A month later, the mansion no longer felt like the headquarters of a feared empire. Children's laughter could be heard in the gardens during charity events. Rooms once used for secret meetings were transformed into classrooms and community spaces. Maria officially retired after decades of faithful service. On her final day, Vincenzo handed her a small envelope. She smiled. "What's this?" "The deed to a little house overlooking the countryside." Her eyes widened. "You bought me a home?" He smiled warmly. "No, we bought you a home." He nodded toward Isabella. Maria burst in tears. "I was only the maid." Vincenzo shook his head. "No, you were the heart of this family." Maria embraced them both. For the first time in many years, the embrace wasn't overshadowed by fear, lies, or suspicion. Only gratitude. As the sun set behind the hills of Italy, Vincenzo looked at the mansion one last time. He had once believed power was measured by the number of men willing to die for him. Now he understood something far greater. Real strength was measured by the courage to choose truth over pride, forgiveness over hatred, and peace over endless revenge. If this story kept you hooked from beginning to end, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who loves emotional mafia stories packed with suspense and unforgettable twists. And let us know in the comments, if you were in Vincenzo's place, could you have forgiven Isabella after everything that happened? Or would the betrayal have been too deep to overcome? Your thoughts might inspire our next story. Until next time, thank you for watching.